its strength, its heart, its mind, to join me in this precious hour, to bless, to break, to bind, and sever all the chains, the doubt, and veils that leave me blind, as we walk along through crooked path and leave this world behind.
Hello again! Oh my god, look at me! I'm in all my positive glory! I can almost cry! He's come back to roost! He looks a little different. I look like one of those fans, you know? Fucking. Oh! Don't waste your time on me! Oh, but now, hello everyone, welcome to another episode, welcome to the recording of Myths and Magic, or perhaps a possible different name in the future. We'll go through a whole list of names, but that's not this video. No, this video is about something I think a bit different that is present, and you hear it a lot in witchcraft or anything else supernatural, in religions or things of that nature. But before I get to that, let me just say how happy I am that my partner in crime has returned to me. Oh my god. And he looks rather good. Woo! Oh my god, I'm so ready. I feel like burning the house down. Oh my god, it's so fantastic, but I'm so happy. It has been a long time. Honestly, but they come back to me. I'm serious. This is part of my identity for this shit. And it's finally here. I have my co-host with me, Grimmy. Grimmy the Grimoire. I don't think I'm going to keep that name, but that's what it's going to be for now. Sorry if I just slurred my words. I'm just positively oozing with excitement. I'm so happy. I have my special thing here. This was my placeholder for the longest time to make sure I don't burn this by accident with that candle over there. And yes, you can see it on the side. And I think I remember seeing in the last scrying that the light or the weird thing was reflecting off the camera. I hope that's not happening in this one right now. I'm simply going to talk about, my subject. So I was doing a lot of deep diving and I was looking at the portals, and yes, I am still there. I am working at the school as well. That's going rather well. I think we're going to have graduations really soon. Promising candidates. No more incidents, thankfully. They've been on their game as of late, and I am very excited and very happy about it because that means less stress for me to deal with. You don't want to be going to school, to your place of work, with a slight bit of anxiety. You know, these kids are very tenacious, and though we've had a few, I guess, issues and I don't want to say racist things, with the hybrids at the school. If you guys all remember, we do have half-breeds at the school as well. We're trying to be incredibly inclusive because some of them became hybrids through no fault of their own, other ones by accident, and we're trying to do the best we can to provide, a place of protection, of safety for them. And it can be rather difficult at times when you consider the types of people we're dealing with. And yes, those people even exist where I come from, believe it or not. Purists, everything of that nature, and I can understand the mindset, but I don't agree with it. Like, some of these people are just here, and some, even though it's incredibly rare, are born this way as well. So that's something we all have to sort of keep in mind, and we have to, consider those sort of things as well. So we haven't had too many issues with that, but there have been a few fights, a few, transfigurations that were untoward. Some of these kids, unfortunately, were trying to change themselves into something normal to become more accepted. They didn't like the way they look because they were told what they are is abominable and they shouldn't exist. And I don't really believe that's the case. Other kids, it's understandable that it was an accidental thing, but sometimes the effects were permanent. Other kids have to get some leeway, we have things like centaurs, we have satyrs, we have things like mermaids or sirens, even things like werewolves or wolfmen or lycans, if you want to call them, just as examples. Are, some of the types that we have at the university right now. And it's something that we're trying to address properly. Proper teaching etiquette, proper, behavior around them as well. Teaching them basic etiquette and to help control the natural impulse they have as being half beast, as it were. The beast nature. Which all of us actually have, believe it or not. But I think that's something to explain in, again, a separate video. Okay, but it's going rather well. Graduations are coming up swimmingly. We haven't had any issues or hiccups so far, and I really hope that remains to be the case, because I do not want to have a repeat of the fiasco from 5 years ago or anything else. This was before the new school was founded. where we had issues before with students, and it was, I don't even want to get into it. It's bad memories, just a lot of blood, slight carnage. There were teachers involved in it. The cult of Magda, believe it or not, surprised to even me, were very against what happened there. I say they're doing it as a ploy to try and garner more favors and followers. I don't believe them in the slightest, but they're their own belief system, and provided they follow the rules of our society, they are fine to practice whatever the hell they want. They do practice magic after all, and that is the field that we are in. And speaking of magic, let us get into our current subject. So enough with this little tirade. Today, I'm going to talk about something that is present in witchcraft, in religions, and everything else, and in our daily practices, and things that we just observe that we may not consider of it being of a magical or even supernatural nature. The subject is known as divination. Divination is a technique, or I believe a craft or practice used in order to predict the events that are going to come into your life so you can better prepare for them. Farmers would use this sort of method to try and predict how the crops would be affected. And by extension, if the crops were affected, the society that relied on those crops was also affected. So they took great heed into what they were able to garner from the spirits that were able to perceive the future that was to come. So let me get into something, because I did take some notes, and this was a parchment that I was using when I was on site because I was bored out of my gourd and I had to do something. And so this sort of idea, this information sort of came to me, and inspiration, because it was something that I did not actually talk about on this channel, but it is something that is quite interesting, that is present in everyday society, but we do not consider it being magical in the slightest. So let me just go into this. Brima, you can take a break for today. I think I pretty much have this handled. You're free to, jump in whenever you want to. I'm not stopping you for that, but it is what it is. So, let me go into this sort of thing. And there are going to be some interesting, I think, delineations and some differences between the other comparisons I'm going to make to what we consider divination. Okay, so make sure you pay close attention. So, and I did do some research on this as well ahead of time, because I wanted to, sort of dive deep into this. Not too deep, because we all sort of know, I'm hoping, what divination is. The practice of, understanding what is to come, or hoping for some future knowledge. But that's a gross paraphrase of the actual definition, which I actually found, and you can all look it up on Google as well, because believe it or not, some of these mundane things do carry over, and it's information that is all shared. And Google is fairly reputable, but I believe the standard definition for this is, I believe, what I'm aiming for, and anything else I can explain. But let me reiterate it again. So divination is the practice of seeking knowledge of the unknown by supernatural means. Okay, this is pretty much from Google. So I hope I explain what the definition of divination is. So in a nutshell, the practice of divination is something that is done to beseech something of knowledge that either comes from the future or something that is unknown to you. Divination isn't only used to predict the future; it is also used to discern what is happening. You can call it discernment, but it's not really, I guess, exactly the same. But you can use it for a similar thing. So, for example, in history, back then, when people wanted to know, for example, if the rains were coming, people would use signs and the characteristics of the cloud to divine whether or not a rainstorm was coming, or believe how soon it would be coming. Other people would use divine rods to find things like water. Now, that was something that was used to help you find something that you otherwise wouldn't know where it is. Is it something that is actually practically used today? It is, I believe, still used, and for the most part, it's not exactly agreed if it actually works. But some people swear by this sort of thing. Where I come from, it is something that is used. Now, the reason why they would use things like iron rods or things like, I think it was wood at one point, but I think metal rods, is because the energy that the water gives off underneath, it is at a certain frequency that sort of reverberates through the metal itself. It is said that the sort of, I guess, the metal or something in it is attracted to the current of the water underneath the ground. Because as the ground is moving, it is sort of, charging itself with energy. And metal, believe it or not, is very susceptible to energy in itself. It is one of those elements that can sort of vibrate or react to energy in certain unpredictable ways sometimes. And so they would use these small little rods to sort of, help them find that sort of thing. And back then also in history, there were even cases where in religions, for example, when you were trying to, divine things of the gods or of the spirits of that nature, you would use methods like bones, you would use things like rocks or shells. And some of these things would carry within them spiritual tags that were aligned to these sort of spirits they were trying to communicate through in order to see what was coming. So the reason why some people would ask such spirits is because spirits live on a different time. And so the spirits are able to perceive things that we normally cannot with our carnal senses. And so the spirits would then be able to see things coming that we normally would not. They could perceive things like danger, like banshees, for example. They're essentially spirits that warn of an impending doom or impending death. And so whenever you hear the cry of a banshee, it's actually like a warning. They're warning you. They're letting you know that something terrible is about to happen. They want to bear witness to it. Using the cry of a banshee is also a type of divination that you normally wouldn't know otherwise. But because everyone is sort of aware of what the cry of a banshee means, it is not really considered divination, but it absolutely is. Throwing things like rocks or seashells, if they fall in a certain position, a category, and provided ahead of time before using these sort of skills or components, you have the meaning of the position of each thing in your mind already, and that's known, so that when the spirit, I think, or the forces at hand reveal these certain things in certain positions, you can delineate from them the events that are to come. I guess what is going to happen, whether it is something futuristic in nature, because that's what it is, or something that is currently presently happening, but you have no idea of what it is really. Like if it's invisible force, if it is something that's done perhaps by another practitioner against you, like I guess like a baneful work. Divination is a good way of knowing what it is that is happening, because it is used for that. It is used for knowing the unknown in the best way that you can. Okay, the method of divination I pretty much just shared, and let me see, reliability. So the reliability of divination also falls upon the connection you have to the force that is essentially giving you this information. If it is one, trustworthy, and two, knowledgeable. Just because something is a spirit doesn't mean it knows everything. Sometimes spirits are people that have just passed on. Other times it's spirits of confusion themselves. And sometimes it's spirits that, don't really give a shit. They don't really care to know. And so you're trying to find out which things are reliable to you. So before you sort of work on a divination, and it's not something that is, demanded, but you certainly have to sort of, call forth the energies or the forces that are aware of things happening in your world. The omnipresent spirits, or I believe the omniscient spirits or beings or deities or whatever you want, to sort of, help you in the focus, or I believe to give questions ahead of time that the spirits, preferably ancestors or spirits that are close to you, would know things that are happening. For example, if somebody likes me, then answer me by making the shells or the bones fall in certain positions, and then you would say, well, is this person someone that I know? Is it someone that is close to me? And judging by how they fall, it would also reveal if it's a yes or a no. The second point I must also give to you about divination is that you want to be not super specific, because it can sort of limit as to how these spirits can answer you these questions. You can say yes or no, but you can keep it a bit vague. But you need to have your definitions for the vague also present. Like, for example, you have yes, no, then you have so, or somewhat, to help give some flexibility to the spirits that are working with you. The reason why they use these sort of direct, I believe, one-term notes, I believe just one-worded answers, is because sometimes the spirits need something that is easier to answer because they communicate on a different level, because they exist in a different plane. So, in order for us to discern better and easier what they mean, we try to keep it focused on yes or no answers, with a so, a somewhat, a maybe mixed in there. Okay, but assuming as well that you have regular practice and these sort of things, you can become a slightly more specific to help the spirit sort of narrow down what it's trying to say. Because, for example, let's say, does someone think about me fondly or sexually, whatever? It will say yes. Okay, and then you say, well, is this person someone that I know? And it can also say yes, but there's perhaps 10 people and perhaps 3 of them want to fuck you, win-win situation, whatever. So as an example, and so you're like, okay, so which of them? So, you can probably throw names out, and so sometimes the spirit will sort of not really give the name because it is respecting the privacy of the person you're asking it for. Because some spirits are like that. Well, like, I can't really tell you the person's name because they don't want anyone else to really know right now, because they could perhaps be in a situation where they can't freely express how they feel. These sort of things happen. Some spirits are fine with it, some others are not. But it is important to sort of do these things in an ethical manner, even though it is debated whether or not divination is an ethical manner of knowing things. It's not exactly fair if something tells you what's happening. Some people believe, but I think any edge you can have over life is, I think, welcome, and I think fair game. Anyone else can use this technique. Whether they don't, it's their problem, honestly. And so then you would go also by, I guess, what is the gender of the person, what is the sex of the person, and it can sort of narrow it down for you. Is this person that someone I have contact with within the last few months, within the last few days, within the last few weeks, or whatever, and so, you would even consult, things like spirits or servitors that you have, to help, sort of give you those hints. So that is also a form of divination. For example, a form of divination is the whole flower plucking, the petal plucking. He loves me not. He loves me not. And so, this is sort of I want to say almost a confirmation bias. If you sort of count the number of petals and then work out in your head when it gets to yes, and you can sort of figure it out. But ideally, that is a divination tactic. You're sort of relying on the plants, the number of the plants. You're sort of, speaking to them, like what it is that you wish for, and you're using the spirit of that plant to help confirm to you whether or not this is happening. But this almost doesn't really make sense if you haven't really been talking to spirit to begin with, and if you haven't actually let it be aware of what it is that you're thinking about, the person that is interested in you, or that you're interested in, for the spirit to sort of know otherwise, because plants are able to communicate with other plants, and then by extension, other spirits that perhaps are in the know. A tree, for example, can observe a great deal. They are silent, but they are always watching. They are very vigilant. And the roots that are underneath the ground connect with other plants, even the things like grass. So everything is connected. They are gossipers, believe it or not. They love to gossip. So they know a lot. The flowers babble incessantly. Sometimes they have to wear earmuffs. It's insane how much they like to talk. But other ones are a bit more, courteous. They don't really like to speak too much as well. But it is something to consider. So they would use this method. He loves me not, or she, or whatever. Loves me not, he loves me not. So when you pull the last petal on what you're going to say in a rhythmic pattern, in a sequential pattern, that is sort of a method of saying, well, it's not going to happen today. I'm sorry. And if it's like the same exact flower or whatever it is, and you're just supposed to pick these things at random, you're not really even supposed to be looking at it, really. You're supposed to pick till you get to the last one. And that's sort of, it's supposed to help you sort of divine what is going on. So it's something that's sort of, not incredibly reliable, I have to say. You'd have to sort of divert to I believe, the older methods of doing these sort of divinations. Things that require the knowledge of spirits or deities that actually are aware of your situation, that can see what's happening, that have influence over your life in some aspects, in order to get a better read on this situation. Okay. All right. So the other thing, let me see here. Things that are or were considered divination. So like the flower thing that I mentioned, is one example. Okay. Another one I believe you can even call, aside from, predicting the clouds or in the clouds, is things like the weather. Like what they do on the Weather Channel is a form of divination. And the reason why it is divination is because they're using their own minds, their own predictive capabilities of how the weather is going to turn out. It is something that before was an act of divination, reading the clouds or things of that nature, how they react, how they, work. And then later on, depending on the patterns you see in the sky, it essentially lets you know about what is to come. So reading the weather, knowing the weather, how it is nowadays, is essentially a modern take on an ancient practice, on an older practice. It was something that was backed by science later on, because people were like, how are you going to know what's going to happen by looking at the clouds? It's kind of dumb. They're just random. But by understanding the way the clouds work, how they flow, how they react with each other, with the air, anything like that, everything that comes into contact, the presence of the sun, the warm air currents, the cold air currents, what happened in a different area before, whether, the region itself is rather flat or mountainous or perhaps a bit of both. Reading the earth for what it is a form of divination, because you're essentially reading something that is letting you know something that's going to happen in the future. When they are giving you the forecast for the rain forecast, is essentially you casting lots to see what is coming into the future. You don't know it's going to rain yet. You haven't seen the rain come, but because of how you read the sky and how you read like the air, it is telling you that something is coming. So this is a form of divination that is backed by science. It's something that is real, and it is something that is happening in today's current climate everywhere. Every country that is developed has a form of weather of weather telling. They're casting their eyes out to see how the things are. The clouds are rolling in and they're coming in. That's a form of divination, believe it or not. And it doesn't really require you to cast anything out. Before they would use things like bone or anything else, and then look at the sky, but they look at everything, the whole picture. Okay, if you don't read the entire book, you never know what the story is about. Okay, or what's even going to happen. Good stories, good readings, judging by how things are going, they foretell us something that is going to happen, with something drastic, droll, or something unexpected. So that's something you have to keep in mind. Okay, let me see here. Another one here. I'm going to read this for a second here. Okay, personal experience with divination. A personal experience with divination, I have to be quite honest. It's not a practice that I really do that much. I don't really use divination almost at all. I wanted to sort of get into it, so, sort of try it or practice it out for myself. I've seen other practitioners do it, and I've seen the videos, and it is quite interesting. And mind you, before I even preface this, you're saying, well, how can you even talk about it? I'm telling you that I research these things like I just told you. And it's a theoretical thing. I use other forms. Not every practitioner is going to know everything about every practice. There's things that we don't know, things that we're always learning. The important thing is that you learn. Okay? I mean, there's certain things I have sort of done with divination. I'm just trying to think about what it is, for example. Okay, this is sometimes divination can come, I think, unwillingly. So there are certain times where things like dreams, for example, can show you events in the future that have not come to pass. Now, dreaming is also a form of divination. It isn't always, but there are certain occasions where a dream every now and then will come to you and will reveal you things in the future that is going to happen. And you probably don't know when and you don't know how, but these things are going to happen. And so there are certain instances in your lives, for example, that can sort of explain this. The phrase deja vu is sort of something that is reminiscent of something that some people disagree with the notion behind deja vu, saying, well, this isn't some people say that this is, I'm going to throw everything up there. Some people think that this is an event that you have already seen, so you're sort of moving along a timeline, and so your mind is sort of bouncing between unwillingly. Inspiration you are perceiving something that has not existed. The I believe revelation. So you're sort of revealing things to others and inspiring them. You can do sort of things. So sort of, go hand in hand together. So these are sort of along the lines of divination. Talking about things like revelation. So revelation is essentially the divine or thing is, yeah, I mean, something revealing to or the world. Yeah, something that can, reveal some things to the world that pertain to humanity. It says humanity. You couldn't. That's the thing. It's like that is given to its inspiration. But revelation can also disclose to you secrets or information that you perhaps didn't know before, and that perhaps I think mankind as a humanity. All of these things sort of encompass the sort of broad spectrum of divination. All these sort of aspects are forms consider them such. I believe, but not. If you're perhaps a believer in in divine ways or natural ways, even unnatural ways, which technically falls under the future, to try and see what is happening currently and what it is to you before it happens. Then it's inspiration. But these are different ones that sort of come from divination. I thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening to this channel. If you are present and been to ask me something that I perhaps missed, I want all of you to sort of remember when it comes to sex or even magic, because magic, if you're out there, make sure that we are on the by the end of the week. I want your honest take and opinions about it and your personal experience with practice. Make sure that you are keeping up on things, poetry, respect, on people that cannot give you this good result all the time. It's different when you're with friends or family that you are closer to, but strangers, forget it. They're not like being completely selfless all the time. See, in your magic, in your craft, whatever you're doing, and learn how to take life by the balls or by the clit, whatever you want to call it. This is about to be a little bit reckless, within, different parameters from time to time. This channel, not only are we family and friends, but we are seekers of truth. Be kind, rewind, reassess, and practice. Goodbye.